Welcome to the North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities Collaboration for Change webinar series. We're excited for today's event and hope you enjoy today's content. A little information on NDCPD. NDCPD is a University Center of Excellence on Developmental Disabilities, also known as a UCED, and we're part of a national network of 67 other UCEDs throughout the U.S. We serve the disability community by providing training, technical assistance, service, and information to the disability community. We have approximately 15 to 20 projects at NDCPD that cover a range of topics connected to disabilities: employment, housing, education, and early intervention, to name a few. Check us out at www.ndcpd.org. This Collaboration for Change event is a series of 7 one-hour webinars that NDCPD is hosting as an informational exchange on specific disability topics. Today's event is number 5 of 7. Each event includes a presentation from an expert speaker, along with a short presentation from an NDCPD staff member describing our webinar topic-related expertise and services. With this event, we hope to build a community of individuals and agencies that have a common interest in disabilities. And just a couple of housekeeping notes. We will be recording today's event, and the recording can be found on our website, ndcpd.org/2024webinar/. Please use the chat to ask any questions. We do have a short online survey for you to share your comments about today's event. Contact hours are available for both nurses and social workers, and we'll need you to complete that online survey to get those contact hours. The survey link will be provided at the end of today's session, as well as emailed to today's participants. With that, I believe we're ready to get things started. Today's webinar is titled Using Customized Employment, and today's presenter is Ms. Deborah McLean from WISE, and I'll be our NDCPD speaker discussing NDCPD's ND Create initiative. And now we will turn the attention over to our guest speaker.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm Deborah McLean, and I'm going to give you a short visual description. I am what you call beyond middle age. In fact, I would say that the history of supported employment, well, let's see, I'm a white beyond middle-aged person with lots of gray hair, and I am talking to you from Portland, Oregon, where I am what's called a WISE associate. So I work with Washington Initiative on Supported Employment, but I live in Oregon. And I also want to say, in regards to myself and my work history, and again, I'm going to reference my hair, I've been doing supported employment basically since I've been working with people with disabilities in regards to employment since 1981. And I became I'm just incredibly, I won't say obsessed. I'm really excited about the transformative importance of seeing people get into jobs that fit them and that have the supports that they can succeed, that allow them to succeed. So I want to say that. Okay, let's see. So using customized employment, I'm kind of come at it from a different direction. So here's the name of the topic. We're talking about using customized employment. Next slide. Okay, so I want to reference a quote that'll sort of frame, my presentation. And it's from John Muir, who was a person who was a biologist and a botanist. And he said he went around the mountains of the West, and he looked at all the different environments that were there, and he sort of cataloged and classified plants and geology, and just wrote all sorts of books describing these areas. And he was very persuasive to the federal government, to Teddy Roosevelt at the time, and really encouraged the government to set up what has become our national park system. So it's really, really important work that, of course, we all benefit as Americans today. So if you think of any national park that you know of, he was really instrumental because he invited people to come and take a look at this amazing space, from California to Alaska to to all over, everything west of the Mississippi and beyond. It's really in sort of highlighted that. But he said, looking at ecosystems and looking at how the natural world is set up, and he said, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And I think that that's really true, so that when you look at changes, both large and small, you really do have a great amount of influence on bigger and bigger systems and events. And so in a nutshell, that's also something that we find in terms of inspirational kind of talking, that the idea that if you can transform the life of one person, you really do change all kinds of other things in the world. So I really became attracted to the concept of seeing people thrive in the workplace, because I recognized pretty quickly that it was incredibly transformative, that it really made a huge difference to that person and to their family and to their employer, and then to their community, and then to the people that came and used those businesses, and to coworkers, and so on and so forth. That, in fact, I would say that it was more transformative in so many ways and more inclusive, getting somebody a real paycheck in a real setting, than perhaps any other thing that we kind of had invented. We thought about getting people out of institutions. We think about how we can get people to to be part of our local communities and activities and things that they like, and so on. And we've developed all sorts of systems to support that. But really, for me, that piece of work has, as I said, the word transformative is really what comes to mind, and is what's kept me in that field so long. Because I sometimes make the joke that, for me, supported employment has been kind of like my hair. It's like before hair dye, during hair dye, and now after hair dye, as long as I have been dedicated to that idea. So next slide. I wanted to really show you, actually, I wanted you to see where, I want to talk briefly about where you've been. And some of you may have seen me jump up to grab my suitcase. I have a real suitcase. It started off when I used to give talks. I would put all these little objects in a paper bag, but then my collection grew and grew. And I'm going to show you my collection, but I'm not able to show you the whole suitcase. So you'll just have to look at this for a minute. But I would like to see if you could just see my face full screen for this piece. So Krista, if you could help us with that. Okay, so I don't know if you can see, I can see all of you, but I don't know if you can see all of me. So first thing I'm going to show you, the first thing that I have in my suitcase is a lot of people. And as you all know, people are all different, right? And yet, we've created since the 1980s, many people with an intellectual developmental disability were not always with us. It was only in the last recent, not even recent, we're the first generation, cradle to grave, to have people, the expectation of what's called inclusion, the idea that people with disabilities are us, that they belong with us, that they're our neighbors, our friends, they're people that we go to church with, they're people that we meet in the grocery store, they're people that should be working alongside of us because they are us. They are our spouses, our friends, our co-workers, and so on. And so that idea that people all belong, right? That notion. And at the same time, in order to access the very services that exist in our system, we end up having to labelize those same wonderful, multifaceted people. We labelize them, and we end up looking at them in terms of their labels. Because once you get a label, it's kind of hard to lose it. And a label, of course, comes out of, you have to prove medically, I need access to support in order to do X, Y, and Z. And this is particularly true in employment as well. So you can't just wake up in the morning and say, gee, you know, I feel like I'm a person with a disability, and I feel like I would like to have these particular services to help me access employment. Instead, you have to medically prove it. So you have to provide a big, you know, compendium of paper in order to get that to come about. And then you have to show that in those papers that you have a label. And that label is usually prominently displayed in those papers and those files, right? And that's a good thing in a way, because it gives you access to supports. But those labels themselves then change how we ourselves are perceived, because those labels are based on things that you can't do. In other words, you have to go and get evaluated to see and make a list of all the things you cannot do, which then gets you, it's like the house that Jack built, that then get you the label, which then get you the service that will help you to get support. And of course, you know, because people are also remarkably uniquely different, that often when we began this work, you get the files of the people that you're working with, and you look at them. First, you see those files and you think, I really don't know what, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, or well, I've never met a person like that before. And then, of course, you quickly see that these are the same people that have the biggest collection of Elvis paraphernalia that you ever, that, you know, in fact, the family proudly shows you, and they have a separate room for all of that paraphernalia. Or they are people that know more about the Second World War than anybody, or that if you sing a small snippet of any song or it comes on the radio, that person knows what year, the name of the band, who wrote it, and can then sing every single verse just from that small snippet. So in other words, you forget, you have to take a step back. First you see the person, then you see first you see the label, then you see the person, then you think, you then see them in terms of what they are uniquely, wonderfully able to do. Because the other piece, as we got better, it was not right what we did in terms of incarcerating people once they got that label and removing them. But at the same time, the idea that we're going to get rid of the label, we built a system that is quite often built on what I call the the axiom of the pantyhose. If you remember your old geometry class, but this is an axiom, meaning this is true, right? So the idea that one size fits all, you all know, isn't, if any of you, and I'm not going to ask for anyone in the chat to reveal or disclose, but if you've ever bought or worn a pair of these, they really are the most most vaguely sized piece of clothing that exists. So it's like small, medium, or large, but that's about it. And so you can't always tell until you go into the other room and you kind of glitch and move it around, that whether it's going to fit your head or your arm or your legs or what, right? And then, you know, many a person who has purchased a pair of these finds themselves kind of hitching themselves up and down. You know, they run into the hall around the corner so that they can make it work. So the idea that one size fits all, even though the funding streams may be uniform or they exist in every single state, and that's a good thing that they do, and they're all dedicated to the notion that people can all work and that they should work and that they need to be in the communities that they live in order to get jobs, just like everybody else. We want to take, you know, think about that notion of one size fits all and remove it, and instead look at each unique, wonderful individual and catalog all the things that they can do, So in other words, to make sort of a very careful close-up compendium. And when you think about customized employment and supported employment, that is exactly what is very specifically and directly intended. The idea that you're going to catalog everything somebody can do, and then think about what they can do and what jobs and what tasks will value or reflect those remarkable, unique cans, the things that people can do. The other piece that I think is really important to think about, especially when you're thinking about employment, is belief. That you have to believe that every single person that you work with, every single person that you work with on your caseload, you have to believe that they can work. And you have to know, so you have to know it solidly. You have to know exactly what they can do. And then you have to think about they can work. You have to have a solid belief in that. You have to have a crystal ball. I carry around little marbles with me at all times because I go to meetings where not everybody believes that everybody can work. So I know that if I said to you, hey, do you believe everybody can work? And you all in this line of work would probably, if I say, write in the chat, and you'd say, yes, 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 I believe, right? You go, yes, yes. So you wait a few seconds, and then you hear what I call, it's like the sound of the yeah, but, like the sound of the frogs in your head. This chorus of frogs goes up, and you go, yeah, but we have this guy, and he threw the TV through the break room window 5 times, not just one time, but 5 times. He's always throwing the TV through the break room window. And yeah, but he can't work, or yeah, but he can't walk, talk, or chew gum, or yeah, but his mother, he wants to work, but yeah, but his mother and his father are not sure that he can work, and yeah, and he's just happy doing something volunteer. He doesn't understand about money, right? That yeah, but, that chorus of frogs, which sometimes gets couched gets in the cloak of self-determination. Well, we asked him, do you want to work? And he said, no, I don't. So therefore, he doesn't have to work. Because it's not a matter of have to or not have to. Really, you have to have that solid belief that everybody can work. And you also have to think and ask yourself that question, what would it take? What kinds of supports would it take? What kinds of supports and strategies would it take to have that person work? And what would that look like? Not a yes, no question anymore, but what would it look like? And to have that vision about that person in a job, working in a job that fits them, where they're supported to do that. And you have to solidly believe that. And I'm talking right now to all of you people who have that word job development in your work description, right? Where it says your job is to go out and develop, or you're an employment specialist, you're going to go out and develop jobs for other people. So I want to encourage you, you have to solidly believe that everybody can work. And you have to believe that yourself. You have to start with yourself. You have to believe that yourself in a very specific way by cataloging the cans, so that you can then represent that concept to total strangers, because that's the essence of what being a good employment specialist is about. It's that taking that belief and carrying it, that belief, that really tender and precious belief about those human beings, and think about how you're going to frame it and present it to other people, quite often people that you've never met. So you have to believe that yourself. Remember that jobs really don't have to do with disability label. It's not a matter of charity, it's a matter of clarity. And it's also that jobs are very specific. If I also asked you to write in the chat, have you had a job that didn't work for you, that didn't fit you? You might say so. You say, oh yes, I did. I know I did. I had jobs that didn't fit me that led me to where I am today. And so it's thinking very, very strategically about jobs. Not any old job will do. Quite often people fail in jobs, not because of any labels or work experience or resume or whatever. It's because it wasn't the right job for them. So it's that really important, as I said, to connect what people can do and to think about finding the right job for the person. And remember also, because sometimes people say that phrase where they say, oh, it's so, he's so flexible. He'll do anything. Nobody will do anything, underscore anything, very long. You'll take that job for a while, but you'll be updating your resume at night because you'll be looking for that next job. If the job you've got doesn't fit, you're going to think about it. And the other piece is that that's our mandate. Our mandate is to think about very carefully, and that's what customized employment allows us to do, is to say, what's the best fit for this person? It's like some of you might be delighted to walk a mile in this shoe, but many of you are like, okay, great. If this is part of my job description, I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to be looking for another job tonight. So it's that idea that a job has to fit. The other thing I want to talk about, because supported employment and customized employment have in them sort of mandated guidelines about support. And so remember that that's the resource you're offering. And I want to caution you all and just let you know really quickly that there's three kinds of supports. And that the one kind of support is what I call supernatural support. That idea of, that's how people most commonly think about it. They say supernatural support, as in, here I come to save the day. And that idea that you're going to go, don't worry about a thing. And you say this to the employer as well. Don't worry about a thing, because I am going to be at Margaret's elbow the whole time, and I am going to help her. And so if she can't wash the dishes fast enough for you, then I will make sure that she does, or we'll sort and organize, or we'll do whatever, or we'll package up those whatever they are, and we'll make sure it gets done. The supernatural job coach, greater than, larger than, who's going to support people, right? And then there's the other one, which is kind of the other end of it, which is what I call the unnatural. And I borrowed this from vampires. The idea that they used to be very polite about vampires. They'd say his teeth had an unnatural pointiness when they first started to write about vampires. Or they'd say he had unnatural sleeping habits, meaning he didn't sleep at all and stayed up all night and chased people around the graveyard, right? So unnatural supports to me is like the absence of support, which happens quite often where people kind of they sort of wash their hands of their connection, even in an agency thing. They say, well, we gave him a lot of job applications to fill out, but he just never filled them out. So I guess he doesn't really want to work, right? So it's unnatural. Or they said, he wants a job at Safeway. And so we said, well, fine, go on down there and just try to get yourself a job at Safeway. And then they didn't. Or they say, he keeps doing very badly at all the job interviews. And we just don't know why, but they're not accompanying that person or delaying the groundwork for it. It's like by the time a person who is seeking a job gets to a job interview, it should, in our case, under the auspices of customized employment and supported employment, it should be just about a done deal. It shouldn't be. So it's not that absence of support. I want you to remember that the other piece is there is funding for support and to keep people working and to strategize as to how to help them succeed on a job. But that the support should look like this. And I want you I want to show you, this is my, what I call, it's my natural support hat. And it's made, yes, I'm going to bend over for you to see that. It's made of underwear. And this little blue thing at the top, that's my first natural support hat, because I first heard about the concept of natural support in 1988. And when I heard that, I thought, being the age I was in the 80s, I said, oh, it's like natural support is like no sugar, it's natural, no sugar, no additives, no underwear. We're just going to kind of cavort through the meadows, in great joyous wonderment or something. But anyway, I then started to think about the concept of natural support. And what I thought about natural support, this is my old hat, and it gradually fell away. It was a ribbon on a straw hat, and it just dissolved into, I left pieces of it in many a town all across the nation. But this is my second one, and it's held up quite nicely. It's very durable, but it's the original stuff on the hat. That good support is like underwear. And if you've ever had a pair of, or you've ever worn a set of underwear anywhere on an undergarment of any type on your body that wasn't quite right, you had to run around the corner again after first you have to adjust the pantyhose, and then you had to adjust the underwear, and you kind of had to hitch and organize it. Good support is like really good underwear. It should just hold you up and get you through the day, and you shouldn't even be thinking about it. Because if you have to be thinking about your underwear instead of the tasks in front of you, then you need to think about changing your approach to support or changing your support strategies, right? So I just want to remind you of all those things. And now I'll go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so Krista, there you go. Thank you. So, okay, so I want to let you know that the concept of supported employment and customized employment is embedded in the framework of our rules and laws and of our nation, so that it's actually embedded in them. So I want to kind of just point that out to you. So you've got the Americans with Disabilities Act, you've got the Rehab Act, you've got the Workforce Investment Act, you've got IDEA, you've got Olmstead, you've got Fair Standards and Labor Act, and this really small one, which was affected people also, which is Lane v. Brown. So I want to go to the next slide. So it's not just like a random thought of, gee, this would be nice to do for people, but rather that this is an important piece. We want to legislate this support. So the Rehab Act in 1973 was amended in 1986, and it's a civil rights protection for people with disabilities. So it said that it created a range of services to reduce barriers in employment and in independent living, and denied discrimination under any program or activity receiving public funds. Because it used to be that before we had the systems that provide supported employment services and customized employment services, we had programs that promoted work that was either piecework, or it was segregated, or it was no work at all. So it was really kind of what was called day programs, and that were kind of separate, that really kept people separate. And so the Rehab Act said, no, we have to think about using the resources that are available to us, like Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, Department of Developmental Disabilities. We need to put those things together, and we need to take those funding streams and work in partnership, Social Security as well, and work in partnership to create a range of services. So next slide, please. And then the 1986 amendments to the Rehabilitation Act clarified that supported employment is a viable outcome of vocational rehabilitation. And I know we say that, oh yeah, we knew that. But really, I want to let you know that in 1986, which is not that long ago, you could go to a vocational rehabilitation. Prior to that, you could go to a rehabilitation counselor's office, and they could say, well, legally, we do not have to serve you, even though you're a person with a disability. If you were a person with a developmental disability, you were not considered to be a candidate for services leading to employment through VR. So there was no partnership, in other words. And so that changed that. So next slide. And then, of course, the Developmental Disabilities Act in 1984 changed a lot. And Madeline Will, who was the U.S. Office of Special Education and Transition, she really promoted and came up with that concept along with some national experts, and came up with that idea of supported employment, that supported employment was a legitimate employment outcome, and it could be considered something that was worth that. And it established state DD councils. It established the university affiliated training programs. In fact, we thank you, Developmental Disabilities Act 1984. That's why we're here today. Created that system all over the country. So they also didn't say, gee, this is something we're going to do just in one place, having supported employment, having university affiliated training programs, having statewide training entities, setting a goal of assisting people with IDD to achieve their maximum potential through increased independence, productivity, and integration. They wrote those words into the law, that our services needed to be something that would help people achieve those three things: independence, productivity, and integration, with the idea in 1984 that should be in every single state, not just in California or in Maryland, but in North Dakota, from sea to shining sea, that every single state in our country should have these elements in it. So really important. Next slide. And if so, that was also where we got the first definition of supported employment, which was paid employment for persons with developmental disabilities for whom competitive employment at or above minimum wage is unlikely, and that meant without support, and who need ongoing support to perform in a work setting. So that idea, including that support should include supervision, training, and transportation. So it really set the stage for thinking about community-based employment, which is really critical. So it's not just a good idea, it's not just a nice thing, and it's not just something that happens in some places and not others, but that universally set the standard in our legislation, in our US Department of Labor, to think about getting people into the workforce. So we're sort of the proud, we're the proud carriers of that act. We're part of that same noble professions that were created in the 1980s to move that forward. Next slide. So at supported employment the book was published shortly thereafter at the University of Oregon, 1987, and it laid out all of the ideas and elements of what good supported employment ought to look like. So it laid out the notions of how to teach and train people, how to think about the workforce, how to think about approaching employers. It was the first book that really talked about that. And I had the good fortune to be employed at the University of Oregon in 1988, a year after that book, that was published. And so to again, really be able to learn and work with people that first thought about that concept of supported employment, which, as I said to you earlier, I can't stop thinking about it because it is indeed the vision I think we need to uphold. So next slide. So the Americans with Disabilities Act 1990 got amended and again looked at civil rights, that you're entitled to transportation, employment, accommodations, and telecommunications. And I'll quote George Bush in this, and says, "Let the shameful wall of exclusion finally come tumbling down." So again, thinking about all those laws that hold things up. Next slide. The Individual Education Act, 1973, amended in 1990, because even today, some school districts are not sure about some of these ideas. So free and appropriate education for students with disabilities through the age of 21, with the idea that transition services meant to be like that link, that connection to adult services, leading to community placement and supported employment. So it's written again into the framework of the systems that we developed, and that we ourselves, particularly if you look at that water cycle of funding coming from taxpayers pay taxes, get what those taxes get decided on, being spent on is the legislature. You've got money coming from the federal government, that the taxes go to the federal government creates taxes, creates the services can go down through the states, the counties, and then down to the providers. But these are all the things we're mandated to think about and to do when we think about supported employment. Next slide. So we're not just saying it's a good thing, it's true. And then of course the Workforce Investment Act, which establishes a workforce system for any person who is unemployed. So it's that thinking about how we're part of this bigger system, so we can think about using those systems as well, so that it creates also, that encourages that partnership, not just of businesses, but really our role, that we could also partner with existing services for that help to serve unemployed people in general. Because remember, the person you're working with is more than just, is more than just a label. They're a person who is genuinely unemployed, so therefore is connected to all those kinds of services as partnership too. So next slide. And then of course Olmsted, which said that people with disabilities should not be blanketly institutionalized, nor should they be continually sent to segregated programs or services, but rather that they have the right to receive services in the least restricted environment. In other words, in our communities, where they live and where other people live and work. So next slide. I know I'm taking the long way here to get here. And then, of course, the Employment First movement, which was endorsed by 50 state governors in 2008, defined by APSE, the Association of Persons in Supported Employment, which is a national organization, a wonderful organization. This man, and sort of promoted by a man named Kerry Garifin and his associate David Hammes. Both of those two people wrote some great articles and some literature about customized employment and how to do it, which you should think about. But one of the things they said was employment should be the first option that we offer people. So in other words, it should be an expected option, just the same way our parents, when we left school, expected us somehow to get a job, to get off that couch and get a job, right? So it's that thinking about that employment should be the first option we offer people, and that we think about when we not only provide services, but that we think creatively as to how to do it. So next slide. So supported employment is a job in the community that pays regular wages, meaning minimum wage or better. It's in a company where most workers are people without disabilities. Next slide. Supported employment involves job duties that match your interests and abilities, and of course, help with keeping and finding a job. So that idea that you don't have to do it all on your own, that's part of our jobs from a service system, and to think about how we're going to support people to do that, and to use a multiplicity, more than one partner, to think about how to make that work. Next slide. So I come now finally to customized employment. So in 2002, people like Griffin, like David Griffin, like Kerry Griffin and Michael Callahan and David Hammes really worked with the federal government on coming up with yet another category under the umbrella of supported employment in 2002, which was this topic called customized employment. And it was particularly geared towards people with significant disabilities, with the idea that we cannot leave anybody out. So that's when people started that wonderful rallying cry that not only are we looking at employment first, that employment should be the first option, but that also all means all. And that in order to do that, we can't just generically place people in any old job that's open that will do, meaning people traditionally what's used to be called the 4 F's, like food, filth, flowers, and I forget what, and cleaning or something like that. The idea that you were going to place people in these generic kind of open entry level jobs because that's all you could think of to place them in. And so people who weren't going to be placed, well, I'm sorry, that's where you got people that were considered, and I hate to use this word in 2024, people who were considered too disabled to work, that idea. So really, customized employment became a phrase that meant it should be customized, it should be individualized. And again, think about the pantyhose, that it should be an individualized and carefully thought out fit, and that you want to be basing into having an individual employment relationship, which means you're going to seek out employers before they even advertise. You're going to begin that discussion of what good employment could look like, and the kinds of supports that you're going to provide as an agency in regards to that potential of creating or inventing a task or a series of jobs given in any given business that will allow it to be individualized to fit the very specific things of what a person can do, which then may make the whole employment scenario become more efficient and smooth and mutually meet the needs of both the employer and the job seeker. And so it's based on an individualized determination of the strengths, needs, and interests of the person with a disability. And it's also designed to meet the specific needs of the employer. And you also want to, that's from the Federal Register of the US Department of Labor. So I want to remind you again that it's written into the framework of how we see employment of people with disabilities. So that idea that it's going to be specifically tailored to the individual, it's going to be customized, so it's going to fit that individual and that particular employer. So it changes also how we go about the actual job development. And then that concept of determination, that idea that if you're not determination, not meaning a yes or no, like can they have this job or can't they have this job, but coming up with an individualized fit that allows that person to fit to work, that's based on the things that they can do and enhances the work of the business or the employer. So next slide. So I think about it like a toolkit. So then I want to just, that determination, you're going to use a tremendous, opens the door to using all kinds of wonderful and thoughtful approaches to collecting information and to figuring out who that person really is in order to make that fit. So I want to call out the work of Michael Callahan, Mark Gold and Associates, Carrie Griffin and Associates, the idea of coming up with the concept of what's called the discovery process, that thinking about very strategically about who a person is, what they do and how they do it. And then also to think about person-centered. I use a lot of things like, I use a process called person-centered employment planning, which I sort of took the concepts of person-centered planning and applied them to the employment arena, with the idea that you're going to know really specifically how to make that fit and what somebody is good at. So think about it as a toolkit, and you're going to add more tools to your approach that will allow you to do this kind of work. Last slide. That you're going to be basing it on a portrait of competence, that in other words, what somebody can do, and thinking about them as a competent person, and then transmitting that idea towards finding the right fit and upholding that belief that they can do this with individualized support as well. So next slide. And then that brings me to the end, which is that customized employment, which is a really carefully laid out process. You'll see that you're going to get to know that person, that you're going to develop materials and information that will promote their competence, that you're going to use that information to explore and connect with community businesses. And I don't mean just by looking at the want ads or looking at online postings, but rather that you are going to be thinking about and connecting and exploring and getting to know as many businesses as you can that might fit that individual. And then you're going to propose very specific customized positions and tasks that maybe don't even exist yet in terms of thinking about that business. You're going to discuss and negotiate with potential employers. And then you're also going to use a partnership with state and local resources as well as with employers to ensure that there's the support there to have that work. And also that you're going to base support strategies on people's individual needs rather than basing it on just some kind of, well, we've only got so many hours of support, but rather you're going to think creatively and inventively to make that support as natural as possible, but also to individually meet the needs of each person that you're going to place. So that is the end of my, I'm sorry that I used up a little bit more time on that, but that's the end of my talk.
Thanks, Deborah. We really appreciate your presentation. And does anyone have any comments or questions that they'd like to add to the chat at this time for Deborah?
There was just one that was basically said, she said, I would suggest that there is more than some districts still struggling with this. Pre-training isn't sufficient. The turnover is too high, and prioritizing time and knowledge and resources is not enough.
Yes, I would say we're in an era, there's very few people that you meet that are like myself that have stuck with employment throughout from its inception to now. And that it's really important that we think about how do we share the knowledge and technology and the art and craft of employment, about getting to know people, about thinking about learning what's important to them, about thinking about how to approach employers. We have to kind of rediscover it anew. Although I would also say that there is a body of knowledge. WISE itself does a series of webinars, other states do as well, that really specifically address how to do good supported employment, how to do good customized employment, and to think about the very, very fine details to carry that forward. And because we have to, again, the training part of it, it plays a huge role in this. That we have to, think about how to recruit and retain people in our field, and then to hold them to that high standard of how to do this and to do this well.
How do we access the resources that you just identified? On WISE?
Well, you can look on, there's a website called WISE is called Washington Initiative on Supported Employment. And they run a number of training series on supported employment and customized employment. And you can sort of, if you look at their website, they have a number of things. Some of their trainings are free, some of them are not. Sometimes people have been using, some states have been using ARPA money to access that. The University of Virginia Commonwealth University also has a number of materials on customized employment and supported employment. Let's see, Griffin and Hammes. Thank you for putting that in the chat. I appreciate that. There's Go Wise, Griffin and Hammes. Mark Gold and Associates also does ongoing training. The good news is that it is a universal standard that's recognized. Also, APSE, Association of Persons in Supported Employment, also has a body of knowledge and information about how to do this. So there's ways to do this, and many of the courses in all the places I mentioned are also accredited. So they've been developed with an eye to saying, okay, how do we make this universally applicable, and then also people can get credit for taking those courses. So and then, of course, many states also have internal kinds of training and technical assistance that they offer on these topics as well.
There was one more question. Can you speak a bit about the funding for customized employment?
Yeah, the funding for customized employment comes from the federal government. It goes to the states, and it exists in every state. And so if you're working for an agency that provides supported employment services, you should also be able to access funding that is connected to customized employment, because customized employment is just a subset of it. And if anything, I would argue that customized employment is really further just defining what good supported employment is about, which is individualized placement based on very careful thinking about who that person is and what kind of job will fit them the best.
It looks like you answered all the questions.
Well, I hope so. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks again, Deborah, and I will go ahead and share my screen so we can get started for the NDCPD portion of the webinar. So my name is Michelle Burney, and I am an Asian and Caucasian female in my late 30s with shoulder-length curly hair. And today I'm wearing black cat-eyed glasses and a dark red sweater with dark blue jeans. And with me, I have my orange tabby, Toshi. And so now that Toshi and I have introduced ourselves, I will be talking to you all about, sorry about that, my slides jumped. I will be talking to you all about NDCPD's customized employment training, North Dakota Customizing Integrated Employment Available to Everyone, also known as ND Create. So a little background on ND Create. What started out as a 3-year pilot project in 2015, helping community rehabilitation providers to explore and implement innovative strategies to provide integrated employment for people currently receiving day supports and or employed in non-integrated environments, has since evolved into a statewide customized employment initiative. And since then, NDCPD has been working to coordinate and provide training and technical assistance on the component of customized employment to community rehabilitation providers with the help of WISE out of Washington State. And since this initial training in 2015, ND Create has been able to work with 13 providers families, as well as transition coordinators throughout the state to learn and implement customized employment skills and strategies. And what were some of the successes? In addition to individuals working in competitive integrated employment, individuals on average saw over 100% wage increase and are employed in employment situations that align with their strengths, interests, and abilities. So what does our training look like today? Our curriculum is accredited by ACRE, the Association of Community Rehabilitation Educators, and can be delivered hybrid, online, or face-to-face. Our training consists of 4 modules with 3 corresponding workshops, and we also provide in-field mentoring, technical assistance, and monthly coaching calls to trainees in our program. Each module contains reading material, discussion questions, practicum assignments, and quizzes and tests. And at the workshops, the trainees get to put what they've learned into practice. So now that you've received this snapshot of ND Create, you may be wondering about possible next steps. Well, if you're interested in partnering with NDCPD to address your customized employment training or other service needs, or you just like to discuss this topic further, feel free to contact myself, Michelle Burney, at 800-233-1737, or you can visit our ND Create website using the QR code, and we'd be happy to collaborate with you. So again, that concludes my portion of the webinar. We would like to thank Deborah for that great presentation, and we'll take just a few more minutes or seconds to entertain any additional questions or you may have, and please feel free to add them to the chat at this time. Well, if there's no additional questions or comments, we'd like to again thank you all for attending NDCPD's Collaboration for Change webinar series. We hope you all enjoyed today's content. Join us again for next week's webinar on March 14th, again at noon Central Standard Time, and hear from Dr. Maura Hart from the Swift Center on moving from inclusion towards rightful presence. And again, if you're interested in partnering with NDCPD to address your training or other service needs, check out our fee-for-service website, ndcpd.org/fee-for-service/ or contact myself at 800-233-1737. And we do have an online survey to get your feedback. The link is in the chat, and we'll also be emailing it to each of you after today's event. To get your contact hours, you must complete this online survey. Upon completion, a screen will appear which will include your certificate of attendance. Thanks again for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.